You ever have one of those days? That's a mix of diesel fuel and coolant. I have no idea where the fuel is coming from. I've got a leak here. Pinch that line. That's my coolant line. Although it sure smells like diesel. That's not my coolant line. Well, this may be an easy fix. Just replace that hose wherever it goes to. Let's see, way back up in here. Back up in behind the fuel filter. One of those days. Well, I got the busted fuel hose off. As you can see there, clearly just busted right through. It wasn't too bad. Way up here on this nipple, we had one of these fittings. And then back up in behind here, behind the fuel filter, we had one of these fittings. That was the easy part. Let me show you all this nonsense. I remember a few minutes ago I said that's a mixture of coolant and diesel fuel. And I, for the life of me, couldn't figure out how both of them were coming out of the same place. Well, watch this. If I open the radiator cap and release the vacuum that's on it, we get a waterfall there of coolant. So there is a hole, and based on what I can tell, it's coming from up underneath the bottom of the radiator, which means the radiator probably has to be replaced. I have no idea how much this is going to cost me, but you know, I guess it's always something. Maybe I should change this from tractor to boat, because I feel like every time I turn around, I'm breaking out another $1,000. I looked at just taking this radiator out myself and running down to Kioti dealership and getting a new radiator and slapping it in there, but the more I looked at this, the more I'm just not a fan of that. There's a bolt here and a bolt here, easy enough. However, you have to take this whole shroud off to get the radiator out. When you get into taking the radiator shroud off, then you get into your coolant reservoir and all these extra hoses and this fan shroud. And your fan that sits in the shroud just perfectly. I mean, we're talking maybe 1/4 of an inch, more likely 1/8 of an inch clearance, so it's going to have to be lined up pretty much smack on, and you're going to have problems with your fan blades hitting your shroud. And then, of course, this is plastic, so that's just going to disintegrate. So I feel like I'm just going to let the Kioti people get it repaired for me. Could I do it? Sure, I could do it. I owned a Jeep for years and replaced just about everything on there but the engine block at one point in time, including the radiator. That thing is spitting diesel. I mean, it's just gushing out of there. Yeah. I don't know how it's running, but it's running. So, I mean, take what you can get, right?
Yeah.
That's better than having no windshield up there.
Yeah, the line must not be,
Well, it runs out from behind the filter and runs up to the front in what looks like a condenser of some kind. So maybe it's bypassing that. I don't know, but there's you can see it. There's just a stream of diesel running all the way down your trailer. So don't you know it ain't rained since you were here last.
dark cloud, the tallest field where I go.
Story of my life. All right, y'all, about 10 days later, we finally got old Bessie here back up and running. We got to get this pile here moved. This is what we started before we put a limb up through the engine compartment and busted the fuel line in the radiator. Got to get this moved. We've still got some other stuff back in here. It's going to require probably a little bit of cutting and then moving as well. Let's get it done. y'all, so we've got everything moved out of here that we're gonna move. These couple of big ones still laying here are cedars, not something I'm gonna buck up and burn in the wood burning stove. We may drag them up to the garden over the winter and burn them up there as biochar, fuel for the garden. A lot of these other rounds and bucked up logs, I'll come in here and get with the bucket when I get this pallet fork grapple off here within the next day or two. We'll get all the rest of this cleaned up. Y'all, these bugs, I'm gonna tell you what, it is summer, summer. Hot, there ain't hardly a breeze blowing, and the bugs will carry you away if you ain't careful. Alright, so why did we get this big old pile of logs here moved? You can see here we've got a stack of firewood that is lichen covered and mostly just plumb rotten. A lot of this will either go in the mulcher or get burned up in the garden for biochar and will be replaced by a lot of this new stuff here that we just moved. Now, some of this in and of itself, as you can see, has seen its better days. However, there's still a lot of good material in here. Now, would I burn this stuff in an emergency situation? You better believe it'd beat hypothermia in a heartbeat. But it's not ideal. Probably not something I just want to sit around and burn and maybe inhale some of the smoke from if I don't get a good draft in my wood burning stove. So we're going to replace some of that old crusty, dusty, musty firewood with some better material here. And then, like I said, what we don't save will go into the garden in one shape, form, or fashion. Alright, y'all, thanks for stopping by the farm. That's going to do it for us on this one. If you would hit that like button, it would help us out with the YouTube algorithm. And we'd love to have you as a subscriber follow along here on our journey as we build our farm and our homestead. Hope y'all have a great week, and we'll see you on the next one. Hey, y'all remember earlier in the video when I said I'm going to start calling this thing a boat? Right? Boat, bust out another 1,000. Look here. $982.58. I wasn't far off when I said 1,000. That's going to leave a mark.